10. Careless driving. 37-year-old aspiring property developer James Bryan was hungover after spending the previous night drinking with a friend. However, he knew his parents were relying on him to drop their groceries off while they quarantined during the early months of the COVID-19 pandemic. So he got into his Porsche and went about his errands near the English town of Boroughbridge. During the trip, Bryan plowed his car into 36-year-old cyclist and father of two, Andrew Jackson, who died at the scene. Bryan was charged with causing Jackson's death by driving dangerously and initially denied his guilt in the case. Although he was not intoxicated at the time of the crash, authorities found traces of cocaine in his system. He claimed that the drug got into his bloodstream from kissing his girlfriend, but later admitted to taking it intentionally. Prosecutors accused Bryan of being distracted by social media on his phone when he barreled into the victim at 48 miles per hour, or 77.2 kilometers per hour. Bryan argued that Jackson had swerved out in front of him, giving him no time to react. But an investigation determined that the bicycle wasn't in the car's path when it was hit. He admitted to causing Jackson's death by careless driving and not leaving enough room when he drove around the bicycle, but denied the dangerous driving allegations. In a surprising twist, a jury found Bryan not guilty of the latter offense. His sentencing for the death by careless driving charge is scheduled for October of 2022. 9. Preoccupied pilot. Pilot Amritpal Singh was flying his two-seat airplane in Colorado one night in 2015 when he lost control of the aircraft and crashed into a field. Unfortunately, the 29-year-old and his passenger both died in the accident. A National Transportation Safety Board (NTSB) report found that Singh would have had to rely mostly on his instruments that night due to overcast weather. This is known as instrument meteorological conditions. However, limited visibility alone wasn't enough to explain the tragedy. The pilot still had about 7 miles or 11 kilometers of visibility, and the investigation revealed that the plane appeared to be operating normally when something went horribly wrong. Footage from a GoPro found near the wreckage showed that Singh and his passenger were taking selfies with their phones during the flight. They started snapping pictures during the takeoff and continued to do so throughout the flight. And they used the flash on their cameras, which most likely distracted and disoriented the pilot. During the mid-air photo shoot, the plane began to descend at 1,900 feet, 579 meters per minute. By the time Singh realized the aircraft was heading for the ground, it was too late for him to regain control. The NTSB report also noted that the pilot lacked the qualifications to fly at night with passengers. 8. Killer on the loose. A jail officer guarding a murder suspect at a Seattle hospital became distracted for just a few minutes, which allowed 19-year-old Giovanni D. Herron enough time to slip by unnoticed. The escape happened in 2018. After Herron was taken into custody on suspicion of shooting his 18-year-old girlfriend and leaving her to die in the wilderness. After firing a bullet into the woman's head, he allegedly stole her car and wallet before using her ATM card to withdraw cash. Herron was apprehended about a month after the murder and was taken to the hospital after repeatedly complaining of an illness, reportedly from taking drugs. He was secured to the bed with leg and wrist restraints that he managed to free himself from just moments before he fled the building. Once outside, Herron got into a lift car and began assaulting the driver. Luckily, an officer had noticed his absence and chased after him in time to stop him from doing any serious harm. But he had to shoot Herron in the shoulder to get him under control. The teen was treated for his gunshot wound and taken to jail. Heron now faces an escape charge in addition to the first-degree murder and weapon charges. He had been treated and released from the hospital twice in a 2-day span before he wound up there for a third time, leading prosecutors to suspect that he faked an illness until he finally got his chance to run. The outcome of Heron's case is unclear, but the ordeal that took place at the hospital compelled jail officials to heighten his security status. His bond was also doubled from $1 million to $2 million. 7. Wrong apartment. Former Dallas police officer Amber Geiger was arriving home from work on the night of September 6, 2018, when she lost track of which floor she was on and mistakenly entered the wrong apartment. Each unit was clearly labeled with its number, which would have been an easy way for her to tell that she was on the 3rd floor, rather than on the 4th floor where she lived. However, she wasn't paying enough attention to the numbers to realize this. She also didn't notice that there was a bright red doormat sitting in front of the door, far unlike the one she had in front of her own apartment. When Geiger opened the door and saw an unarmed African-American man she didn't recognize sitting on the sofa eating ice cream, she pulled out her service weapon and shot him twice in the chest. She soon realized her mistake and dialed 911. The victim, 26-year-old Botham Jean, died from his injuries. Geiger was initially arrested for manslaughter, but the charge was eventually upgraded to murder. Protests erupted as the nation grew increasingly fed up with the seemingly endless problem across America of cops shooting unarmed black men. At her trial, Geiger claimed that she thought she was at her apartment and mistook Jean for an intruder. Prosecutors argued that she missed the many obvious signs that she was on the wrong floor. They claimed that she entered the wrong home because she was distracted by a steamy text conversation she was having with her police partner and married lover, Martin Rivera. The pair had been romantically involved for about a year and were trying to arrange a rendezvous for later that night. Geiger's defense lawyer argued that Amber wasn't distracted by the flirtatious texts, but that she was simply on autopilot and acting out of habit on a floor that had a similar layout to the one she lived on. Even if this were the case, it still means she was too distracted to have the basic awareness of her surroundings that any person should. The court did not believe that just because she entered the wrong apartment, she had any reason to open fire. Geiger was convicted of murder and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Her sentence is scheduled to run until 2029, but she could be paroled as early as 2024. 6. Distracting podcast. 59-year-old funeral director David Duckett's life was cut short one evening in 2019 when a young woman crashed her Fiat into his motorcycle on a highway near the English town of Grimsby. He was waiting at the back of a line of vehicles that had accumulated during the investigation of another crash, when 24-year-old schoolteacher Gemma Rutherford failed to see that traffic had stopped and hit the father of 4. Rutherford was charged in connection with Duckett's death. Prosecutor Jeremy Evans said that she was going between 34 and 45 miles per hour, 54.7 to 72.4 kilometers per hour, when she tried to swerve out of the way and accused her of being mentally distracted by a podcast she was listening to. Rutherford admitted that she failed to pay attention to traffic and took responsibility for her role in Duckett's death. The judge overseeing the case imposed an 8-month prison sentence, suspended for 2 years. She was also bound by a curfew for 6 months with electronic monitoring and was banned from driving for 2 years as well. 5. Cleaning fluid mishap. In August of 2022, 3 residents at the Atria Park Senior Assisted Living Facility in San Mateo, California, unknowingly drank cleaning fluid and 2 of them died. They thought that they had been served cranberry juice by the facility's dietary staff, but after drinking the alkaline liquid, they were rushed to the hospital with severe blisters and bleeding. One patient, 93-year-old Peter Schroeder Jr., languished in the hospital for 12 days in excruciating pain before he passed away. His daughter Susan spent his final agonizing moments with him and later told NBC News about how hard it was to see her father suffering. An investigation found that a kitchen worker had filled a pitcher with the cleaning fluid with plans to use it for its intended purpose. However, the employee got distracted by a disruption in the dining room and unintentionally served the solution as cranberry juice. In the wake of the tragedies, a facility spokesperson announced that the employees involved had been suspended pending the outcome of an internal investigation. The company reassured the public that it was complying with law enforcement and the local Department of Social Services, who were also reviewing the case. Schroeder's surviving relatives have filed a civil lawsuit against Atreus Park, alleging negligence and elder abuse. The family's lawyer, Catherine Stebner, told NBC that understaffing is a chronic issue at the facility. She accused the company of deliberately keeping a short-handed staff to maximize its profits. She explained that there weren't enough workers on duty to safely handle the distraction that drew the employee away from the cleaner they had just poured and came back to, thinking it was just cranberry juice. San Mateo District Attorney Steve Wagstaff told the news outlet that he was reviewing the police investigation's findings to determine if charges for elder abuse or any other crimes will be filed. 4. Deadly digging machine. Estelle Davis was crossing an intersection on her way to work in Brooklyn's East New York neighborhood in 2021 when a backhoe struck her in the head with its shovel and then ran her over. The 61-year-old home health aide died in the freak tragedy, leaving both detectives and her distraught loved ones with more questions than answers. Video footage shows Davis looking down at an object in her hand, most likely her phone, as the construction vehicle drives in reverse and knocks her flat on her back. She was dragged for several feet before the backhoe came to a stop. Authorities spent nearly a year investigating the incident to determine whether a crime was committed or if it was simply a tragic accident. In early 2022, they charged the backhoe driver and the construction site foreman with manslaughter, resulting from their alleged failure to take proper safety precautions. The case is still ongoing today. 3. Distracted driver. 51-year-old Howard E. Heinzelmeyer was driving a work-issue Dodge Ram pickup truck one morning in July of 2022 when he crashed into a Toyota Camry, killing both the driver and passenger. Heinzelmeyer rear-ended the Camry, causing it to spin out of control and hit a concrete barrier. He allegedly told Florida state troopers that he had dropped his phone onto the floor of his truck and was looking for it when the crash occurred. The accident report notes that the driver was operating the vehicle in a careless or negligent manner. According to the most recent update, no criminal charges have been filed against Heinzelmeyer, but the investigation is ongoing and could result in charges. Attorneys representing the surviving family members of Tracy Carson and Daniel Whitfield, the men killed in the crash, have filed wrongful death suits against Heinzelmeyer and his employer for alleged negligence. Both cases requested jury trials and unspecified damages. 2. Nude sunbather. An Austrian woman was apparently trying to get an even tan one summer day in 2014 when she laid face down with her naked rear end and legs hanging out the window of her third-floor apartment in Vienna. Gregory Shakaki was one of the many drivers who noticed her unclothed body in plain view. He later told the Daily Mail that he thought he was suffering from sunstroke when he first saw the sultry sunbather. Another motorist, Michael Kianast, told the press that he saw two male drivers get into a fender bender after shifting their gaze away from the road ahead of them to look at the woman. He said that one man had asked the driver of the vehicle who hit him if he was watching where he was going when he crashed. The other driver reportedly replied, "No, I was distracted," and pointed up at the naked woman, and the man who was hit said, "Oh, right, I see what you mean." Police arrived to find cars caught in a traffic jam outside the building. But by then, the woman had gone inside and closed her windows. 1. Retired cop rescue. In 2022, a motorist in Mooresville, North Carolina, was extremely lucky that there was a retired police officer close by when they somehow drove their vehicle into Lake Norman. Emergency workers responded to the scene after receiving a call about the submerged driver and were relieved to find that they had already been rescued. The car quickly began to sink after it drifted off the road and veered straight into the water. A former NYPD officer, who just happened to be nearby, jumped into the lake, unbuckled the driver's seatbelt, and helped them out of the vehicle to bring them to safety. Authorities released limited details about the accident while they investigated, including the cause. However, they took the opportunity to caution the public to follow safety rules when behind the wheel and to avoid driving distracted. Police may have suspected that distracted driving played a role in causing the car to roll into the water. Would you rather accidentally get into the wrong car while distracted or walk into someone else's apartment? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.